We hope that this institute will be both a generator of ideas on human development, a disseminator of ideas on human development. And so I think our partnership with the Institute of Advanced Studies will really be very helpful in making that happen.
The picture is this, that there is really no conflict between high growth and human development, because human development is not only good in itself, it's one way of achieving growth. And despite the fact that China lacks the kind of multi-party democratic approach that we happen to have, there has been sufficient concern with the lives of the underdogs of society in China to make a picture of a kind that puts India quite a bit to shame. 43.5% of our children are undernourished. The percentage in China, as opposed to 43.4, is 4%, 4.5%. Under 5 mortality, a bad thing, in India is 63, in China it's 18. India spent 1.2% of the GDP on public health care. China spends 2.7%, more than twice as much. It's the lack of the basic amenities of life which make the Indian inequality so extraordinary. It's not the story of the rich and the super rich and the tycoon, but that's a different part of the story. When we had a catastrophic organizational failure, and that certainly needs fixing because the Indian public sector requires accountability in a way it doesn't have. And India's infrastructure, physical, not just social, but both, requires building. But we have to put them in proportion. The headline said 600 million people plunged in darkness. Well, that's true. But 200 million of them never had any electricity connection anyway. The other kind of real deprivation, and I'm absolutely delighted that at long last the issue of violence against women is receiving the kind of attention it had. It absolutely. But I would have been even more delighted if it was recognized that Dalit women have been undergoing real violence over a very long time with hardly any protest and any organization behind it. I think there is an absolute gulf in that picture. So it's really what you have to address is not just government policy. You have to address opposition policy, and also the responsibility that we as citizens ought to take as to what we put as focus in our demands for the government, from the opposition, from the media, from the society. And I think that's where the issue of human development, it remains a very important perspective to look at in India today.
First, that superior human development outcomes are possible and have been demonstrated at lower rates of economic growth. And the classic example of this is Bangladesh. If you compare Bangladesh with some of the fast-growing Indian states, and I would include Gujarat, Andhra, Karnataka, these are all fast-growing Indian states, on 5 of the most crucial economic indicators related to human development, Bangladesh scores higher at consistently lower rates of economic growth. It's not a coincidence that most of these indicators on which Bangladesh scores higher are related to women's empowerment and sanitation. Second, high economic growth does not necessarily translate into superior human development outcomes. If you take Karnataka, it is a high growth state, but you have 6 districts of Karnataka where human development indicators are as bad, if not worse, than sub-Saharan Africa. And I think this is something that is crying out for public action. And if Professor Sen particularly adds his very influential voice, I'm sure that in the next decade or so, sanitation will begin to occupy the place that education now occupies. Maybe 20 years ago, education was not part of the political debate. Today it is. And I'm hopeful that 10 years from now, sanitation would be in the same category.
If you have a society in which systematically treated a substantial minority of the people as less than human, human development is a difficult problem. And I think one of the things perhaps the center ought to do here as a pioneering effort is to really have a human development index only for women in India.
We hope that in the years to come, the new center, the International Center for Human Development, will be an institutional home for these ideas, an institutional home where research will link with policy, where institutional innovations that have been practiced in countries across the world will be available for sharing, and where there will be a thick conversation that will develop between countries of the global south.